أهلا وسهلا فيكم متابعينا. عندنا حلقة جديدة من برنامج شرايها عليا، معكم علياء المؤيد، وحوارنا اليوم مرة ثانية عن موضوع السرطان وعلاج السرطان بالطب البديل. معاي الطبيب اللي تكلمت معاه في كذا حلقة في السابق، فرجعوا لهم إذا ما شفتوهم على الويب سايت على يوتيوب. دكتور توماس لودي متخصص في علاج السرطان بالطب المكمل، يعالج في تايلاند. وحوارنا اليوم بيكون عن السرطانات التي لها علاقة بالهرمونات. حوارنا بيكون باللغة الإنجليزية، ولكن تقدرون تدخلون على الترجمة العربية في الإعدادات للحلقة نفسها. الحلقة كلها مترجمة، ممكن تحصلون على الترجمة. Thank you very much, Dr. Lodi, for coming with us on the show today. Again, we have many episodes in the past. We've spoken about cancer and alternative therapy, cancer and complementary therapies. And today I wanted to talk about a specific topic, which is hormonal imbalances in cancers related to females, so female-related cancers, female hormones, and how sometimes the lead up to a hormone-related cancer, such as breast cancers, ovarian cancers, uterine cancers, how sometimes we can pick up the hormonal imbalances and see the route into cancer. So it might start as a hormonal imbalance, it might start as menopausal symptoms or fibroids or any sort of lumps in the breast, for example, and then become a cancer. I want to see the causes before they happen. So I want to look at prevention in terms of hormonal and taking the hormonal route as prevention for cancer. So what do you see leading up to these hormone-related cancers?
Sure. I mean, it's a very important question, an issue. Unfortunately, right now we live in a world that is extremely toxic, and one of the biggest offenders are the hormone disruptors. And we're finding, I mean, when I test for the last 8-10 years now, when I test people's hormones, and I look at all levels of hormones, starting with the hypothalamus, the pituitary, all the way down to the ovaries, and just look at the whole cascade. And what we're seeing is that some of the earliest hormones that you see, all steroid hormones, all hormones that are related to sexual activity, sexual reproduction, and all that, come from cholesterol. So cholesterol is first turned into pregnenolone. Pregnenolone then goes into different pathways. One is DHEA, and DHEA is kind of one of the parents that then turns into either estrogen or testosterone. So that's the sex hormones. And then progesterone goes down another path, but it all comes from cholesterol, pregnenolone. So what we're seeing disruption at the pregnenolone level and the DHEA level. And in fact, in the last 8-10 years, I think I've only found 2 people with healthy DHEA levels. And I'm talking about people that have never even had cancer yet, right? And I said yet because I'm seeing that as being a precursor or being as part of the way that the whole pathway is initiated. So ultimately, when we look at hormones, we have to understand, just like in all of physiology, we have to understand that if we want health, what we need is balance. So with a woman, it's really, really clear. A woman must have a balance between estrogens and progesterone. There are other hormones involved, but those are the 2 main players. And we can look at, in a very broad sense, that estrogen builds things up, causes them to develop and grow. So we see, whereas progesterone does the opposite, brings it down. So in very general terms. So we understand, like every woman knows this, prior to having her menstrual cycle, her breasts may get engorged, she may gain a little bit of weight. And then of course, if that weight gain, if that water, that edema actually occurs in the brain, then you're going to see mood changes and you're going to see other associated psychological symptoms. And so not very few women don't have any signs. Very few women, oh, I got my period. How surprising. You know, they know it's coming. They can feel it coming. So anyway, what we're seeing, and we've been seeing for quite a while now, is a dominance of estrogen. So when we don't have a balance a net balance throughout the month, because we have the month. The way the normal cycle goes is that we count the first day of blood coming out, the first day, as day 1 of the cycle. Day 14 of a healthy cycle would be ovulation. The egg comes out of the ovary, and then at the end of the cycle is when the blood comes out. It becomes day 1 again. So the first part of that cycle is dominated by estrogen. So if we looked at the curve, we would see estrogen come up, peak just before ovulation, and come down, right? And then progesterone is going up very slowly, but right after ovulation, peaks. And so we have the first part of the cycle, estrogen, second part, progesterone. Well, in order to make the progesterone, ovulation had to have occurred. If ovulation did not occur, you won't have high levels of progesterone. And so when a woman has a cycle where she doesn't ovulate, the medical term is anovulation. An means no. So she has an anovulatory cycle. With an anovulatory cycle, what happens is the ovary, normally the ovary will have a lot of little eggs that are vying and fighting to be the one to come out that month. And so finally, when that egg is extruded, the place in the ovary from which the egg was extruded is called the corpus luteum. And it's the corpus luteum that produces progesterone. So if there's no ovulation, you don't have a corpus luteum, and therefore you don't make progesterone. So we are seeing more and more anovulatory cycles. That is, a woman's having her period, but she's not ovulating. And when you're not ovulating, you're not going to make progesterone. So for that month, you'll have a net estrogen dominance. And if it goes on for 2, 3, 4, you might have, let's say you ovulate every third cycle or every fourth or every second, whatever, the net effect for the year is that you were estrogen dominant. And since estrogen is that part of the hormonal system that stimulates growth, we see things are growing, but they're not shrinking back down to normal size. So there's a net effect of growth, right? And growth, growth has to be checked. If it has to be checked, we can't continue to grow. We have to grow, and everything is phasic. Everything is in cycles. So that's what happens. So what do we see in a breast? We see what's called fibrocystic breast disease. Basically, it's just cysts. What do we see in ovaries? We see ovarian cysts. We see uterine fibromas. So all of these things are evidence of estrogen dominance. So when a woman comes in or she's experiencing fibroids, that's really the problem, the underlying problem. You can cut it out, sure, but you haven't changed the underlying problem. So that's it. So anyway, so the breast cysts, the ovarian cysts, and the fibromas, their ultimate malignant sequela is a tumor. So tumors of those different.
So what do you look at in terms of if a female comes to you at before menopause and after menopause? What is the difference in what you look at in terms of hormonal balance? Like, what do you see common in women that are regular reproductive age versus women who are entering menopause or premenopausal or postmenopausal?
Okay, well, in a woman that's gone through menopause, of course, it's pretty much, most women are pretty much the same, and that is all hormones are low. Progesterone is low, estrogen is. Now there are 3 estrogens we have to keep in mind. There's estrone, estradiol, and estriol. Okay, and they have different effects, and the reason they have different effects is because they stimulate different receptors. So remember, it's not necessarily the hormone that causes the effect. It's the receptor that picks it up, because that receptor has its effects. So estrone and estradiol connect to ER alpha, estrogen receptor alpha. And alpha does certain things, makes tissues grow, breasts grow, it makes the lining of the uterus increase, ovarian function. Whereas estriol, which binds to the beta receptor, actually does the opposite. It actually shrinks these tumors. It actually shrinks breasts, shrinks ovarian cysts. And it's interesting, but the estriol is the one that is dominant during pregnancy, right? And that makes good sense, because during pregnancy, a woman's immune system is kind of turned off a little bit. Otherwise, she would reject the embryo, because the embryo is half someone else, not her, yes. Right? So that's an important thing to keep in mind. That's why in these tumors, in these cancers, women with breast cancer, even if it's estrogen receptor positive, we can still give them estrogen so that they don't get vaginal dryness, they don't get osteoporosis, they don't get all the horrible things that happen from estrogen deficiency, but without stimulating tumor growth. So we can use estriol. But so what do I see in postmenopausal women is just a decline in all of them. And so what we do in that case is we want to bring women up back to a healthy cycling condition, but with the right estrogen. So we use estriol, and of course we could use progesterone, and then we use testosterone. We have to be a little bit careful with testosterone because it can convert into estradiol, and estradiol, as I said, stimulates the alpha receptor. So if that's the case, then we would use, there are some herbs, chrysin and some other herbs that can block it from becoming estradiol, can block the testosterone from becoming estradiol. But there's a drug called Arimidex, or it's an aromatase inhibitor. Quercetin is also quercetin, which we all know of as a polyphenol, is also an aromatase inhibitor. So you want to block testosterone from becoming the estradiol. But testosterone, women need testosterone for the same reason that men need it, for muscle strength and all. It's not only libido; it's got many other effects too. So, so in a woman that is premenopausal, what I'll see is an imbalance. I'll see that like we said before, she's not ovulating, so we're not seeing high enough progesterone levels to balance it out. In fact, there was a great book called "What Your Doctor May Not Tell You About Breast Cancer." I don't know if you've ever read it, but it's by an MD and a PhD. It was Dr. May and Dr. Zava. Zava was the PhD. He's still alive. He's in Arizona, and he collaborates very closely with Dr. Goodyear, who's at my clinic in America. They work very closely together. But their conclusion in that whole book was, if we took every 15-year-old girl and just started her cycling on progesterone, we would see a dramatic decrease in the incidence of breast cancer, just by balancing out that one effect. So, you're exactly right. It's that imbalance that can lead to it. Now, there are other factors that are necessary, right? And we all have those anyway. That's just our lifestyle and lack of exercise, all the things that are lifestyle related. But the hormones are very, very important in those respects. So in both of those cases, my goal is to bring women to either, if they're young, let's say if they're under 40, 45, I want to bring them to whatever healthy levels of hormones they should have, and we give them to them in different sequences so that they can be cycling in a healthy cycle, right? If they're over 45, if they're 50 and they're starting to go through decline, but they haven't gone through menopause yet, I still want to get them back to a healthy 45. I like the age of, actually 35 to 40 is probably the perfect age, because you are past the crazy hormones of the 20s, and you're not yet into the decline of the 50s. So you're kind of at your optimal functioning there. And so we want to get, even men, we want to get men to 35 to 40 is really the best. And by the way, just note for the men that are listening, prostate cancer basically is breast cancer in men. Yeah. It's basically pretty much the same things. We now know that it's the testosterone being converted to the estrogens that are stimulating the whole growth of the prostate, not the testosterone itself. So. Yeah.
Okay, so I have a few questions. The first question is, so you're saying that it is because they're having non-ovulatory cycles that not enough progesterone is being produced. And I assume you started the episode by saying that we're exposed to a lot of toxicity. Therefore, these have an estrogenic effect or xenoestrogenic effect. Is that correct? So these are the two main factors that would cause a less progesterone in a female? Or are there other, can we say maybe also dairy products or hormonal foods would also increase estrogen?
Right. And that's a very good topic. But more than, in addition to estrogenic foods, there's also the toxins like, for example, BPA, which we all plastics. It's even on that little receipt you get when you you use your credit card and that little curling receipt and you hold it, that's got BPA on it. So you're getting bisphenol A, you're doing that. We know that that's a hormone disruptor. And so what it does is it blocks the hormones at some very unique checkpoints in the middle of the system, like the DHEA or the pregnenolone hormone. And if you knock those out or you make them imbalanced, everything downstream will get out of balance.
Yeah. So when you advise people, do you advise them to first stop the estrogenic effects coming in from the diet or the toxins, or do you go into immediately balancing the hormones, balancing the progesterone? And in addition to that question, there's a lot of questions or debate about the safety of hormone replacements or taking hormones. So what type of hormones do you use in order to make that balance?
Okay, very good. Actually, I do both. We do both at once. The foods that we would not want them to take any longer, for a variety of reasons, is dairy, and meats. If they were like 100%, I got to eat meat, I'm not going to be able to live. Okay, make sure that they're organic, they're grass-fed, they're not getting any injections of hormones. Because one of the things we're seeing is that the milk and the beef, and I don't know if they do this to sheep, but I know they do it to dairy cows, and they have these hormones that are absolutely related to that. But as far as one of the controversies I want to clear up is the phytoestrogens found in soy. Everyone that recently, I guess the last 10 years, there's been a lot of research saying that soy is bad, unhealthy, because it's a phytoestrogen. Well, it is a phytoestrogen, but they need to go a little bit further. Which estrogen is it? It stimulates the beta receptor. It stimulates ER beta, so it actually is helpful. It shrinks tumors, and it's protective it actually blocks the alpha, so that the estradiol or estrone that's in the blood cannot even bind. So in that way, it almost acts like tamoxifen, okay? So estriol, which is a natural hormone that the body produces, and the phytoestrogens in soy both do the same thing by attaching to the beta receptor. So, even if you had never studied any science, let's say you just looked around the earth and you said, Japanese people live 10 years longer than us, and they eat soy all day long. They never got breast cancer at all until we introduced the Western diet. So what's that all about? How can that be the case? How can science be finding something that is contrary to what observation tells you? It can't. In other words, you're right, it's a phytoestrogen, but it's a good one. So,
but sorry, just a question about the soy. Is the soy that the Japanese are eating in the form of tofu and tempeh and those fermented ones, is it the same as soy milk that is now commercialized and genetically modified and all of that? Because that's where the debate, I think, lies.
Right. It's got to be non-GMO, 100% sure.
Okay.
It's got to be, if we look at indigenous, like, who were the ones that ate soy all the time? Well, the ancient Chinese, and even pre-modern, and maybe even some Chinese villages do, and the Japanese do, right? And so do the Koreans. So they eat that naturally. But what do they eat? They eat the fermented. They eat natto, right? They eat miso, tempeh, those are ones. Now we know tofu is not fermented, but again, the only real benefit of eating the fermented food is that you don't get the GI complications from it. But you can still get benefit from tofu. But again, miso, natto are just superb, excellent for everyone. And not only that, you do get a whole complement of protein from it. So it turns out to be really good. What was?
So we were talking about the foods that you would omit and the foods that you would increase, and then we were talking. I asked you about the type of supplemental hormones that you would give. That is hormone replacement therapies that are a bit safer and sources of those.
Well, the whole issue of the risk of hormone replacement therapy came in the 90s. There was a large study done called the Women's Health Initiative throughout the United States, and I forget, like 100,000 women were enrolled, or more than that. I don't remember the number, but they had to stop the study in the midst because women that were getting the actual drug were dying of all causes at a much higher rate. So they had to stop the study. So that at that point in time, hormone replacement therapy got a really bad name. But what wasn't looked into, and we found out later on, it's not hormone replacement therapy. It's that what they were using were synthetic artificial hormones. Because in order for a drug company to patent a hormone, it must make it non-natural. So they add a molecule onto it. So now it's a unique substance. They can patent that. So it wasn't, so they were taking the estrogen in horse urine from pregnant mares, and they were taking that estrogen and then modifying it. And the same with the they weren't progesterone, they were progestins. And these progestins are the bad actors. So yes, when we balance, we use plant-derived, biologically identical hormones that there's no difference. Probably the person who needs to be recognized for having brought all of this to our attention is Jonathan Wright, Dr. Jonathan Wright in Washington, Seattle, Washington. Amazing. Just look him up on YouTube, listen to his lectures, read his books. Him and another guy named Gabby, they do lectures. They teach the alternative doctors about hormones. And believe me, none of this stuff will you hear from a conventional endocrinologist or a conventional oncologist. They just don't know enough. It's really tragic, but they just simply don't know enough. But yeah, so we use biologically identical, and we make sure that we cycle it. So usually we put a woman on a combination of, it depends. If she doesn't have breast cancer, then we can use Biest. If she hasn't has breast or ovarian or anything like that, we can use Biest, which is, we make it 90% estriol and 10% estradiol, right? Now, someone who's had, and even if she has fibrocystic breasts or anything like that, we know that she's estrogen dominant, she's at risk, so we'll put her on 100% estriol, right? So the estriol, we do that days 1 through 26 of the cycle, and then days 12 through 26 on the progesterone. And we give the progesterone at night, and the other one in the morning. And then there's a 4-day holiday, and then you start all over again, right? Or if the woman's cycling, that's on a postmenopausal woman who doesn't have a period, but on a woman who's actually having a period, we wait until she has her period, and again, that's day 1, and then we go like that again. So that's how we would replace and try to rebalance hormones. And we don't just think that we got the right combination the first time off. So we wait, and either 6 or 12 weeks later, we test again, because we need to see what's happening. And then we modify. And it may take 2 or 3 tests to find the right combination for that woman, right?
Yeah.
And,
yeah. Okay, several questions. I have so many questions. First of all, what is the natural source that these bioidentical hormones is coming from? Where is that source, if it is in nature? And second question is testing versus symptoms. Do you feel that you can go by some of the symptoms, even just to pick up a hormonal imbalance? If somebody now watching this does not have access or has never even heard of testing hormones for cancer prevention, what symptoms are we looking at in somebody who is low in progesterone, high in estrogen, or the other way around?
Okay, so the foods are usually some of the root vegetables like yams. Yams are they just have the sterols, the same sterols that we have. Nature just made it that way. And in fact, if you look at the indigenous cultures around the world, that when women, it was part of their culture, the culture of their cuisine, that they would start to eat these more and more of these root vegetables as they got to menopausal age. So, and what it does just help. Maca is another one, which is still it's in the brassica family, but it's still a root. And they actually have the actual hormones that we have in them. So that's how the compounding pharmacists will use those as raw materials, right? So the difference between a compounding pharmacist and a retail pharmacist is a retail pharmacist is buying patented drugs that are not natural. And we know that because they're patented. And then the compounding pharmacist is taking natural substances and producing according to the doctor's prescription. So that's the old 100-year-ago term for the chemist, the neighborhood chemist. That's what they did. They weren't a chemist. In those days, chemistry wasn't a terrible name like it is now, because it was basically taking natural products. And even you go back to the early part of the 20th century, opium. Opium was used in lots of products. In small amounts, not enough to get you high, but it has some very important medicinal effects, just like cannabis did and does. You know, all of these things were used in the pharmacopoeia of natural medicine. So, okay, so then the second part was?
The second part was symptoms versus testing. Like, can we go by symptoms alone without necessarily having to test for a hormonal imbalance?
Well, in a premenopausal woman, sure. Postmenopausal, yeah. I'm sure you've met women who've gone through menopause who said, "Boy, that was a breeze. I didn't even know it." Well, she's got no symptoms, but a lot of women have, you know, they get depressed. They get vaginal dryness. That's one of the most the easiest ones for a woman to notice. If you have vaginal dryness, that means you do have an estrogen deficiency. And I say deficiency, you're saying, well, this isn't menopause natural? Yes, it is natural. It is natural. But because we've lived unnatural lifestyles, we've had unnatural lives, now we're not going to have a natural evolution of hormone decline. And that's easy. You just get estriol, 0.05%, made by a compounding pharmacist, and you just place it inside vagina at night for about 2 weeks, back to normal. It doesn't take long to do it. And then you just do it twice a week really to maintain it. So it's very easy to correct with biologically identical hormones. But the other woman who's premenopausal, of course, she'll have the symptoms we discussed. If she finds that she's got lumpy breasts, right? If she finds that her periods are irregular, if she finds that she gets extraordinarily emotional before her cycle, you know, those are the kinds of things, you know, and she feels you get bloated and it just doesn't seem to go away very quickly and all that. That's signs that you definitely have dysregulation of your hormones. And then you can also, without even having statistics, you can look at your diet. If you're eating a lot of cow's milk, drinking a lot of cow's milk, or any other kind of what do they call it? Factory farmed animal that's been injected with, or you know they've been injected with hormones. So you know you're going to have so if you're eating, let's say you don't even eat dairy, but you eat a lot of beef bought in the store, you're gonna have, you know, and for men too, you're going to have the same thing. You're going to find PSA rising at an early age.
Yeah. I'm curious, what ratio do you find that hormone-related cancers are higher in older women or postmenopausal women, or does that not correlate to age? Like, does it make a difference, the rates? Do they increase with age?
They do. All cancers increase with age, and that's due to different factors.
Yeah. And this is, sorry, go ahead.
But the other factors that are all the other factors that contribute to that are factors that we all know about. You know, your immune system gets weaker, and that's probably the main cause. And a big part of that is that in the center of our chest is a gland called the thymus gland, and it just shrinks every decade. It shrinks and shrinks, and that's how we make T cells. And when we don't have enough T cells, we just can't kill the cancer. So.
Yeah, so that was my question. I mean, so you feel it's generally related to older age rather than specifically the hormonal shift that happens postmenopausally?
Yes, that's what I think, absolutely. Because we're also finding, there's some very amazing studies coming out that are showing that, I was just reading one today that's showing that the death rate for women getting breast cancer under 30 was much greater than older. And that's because they were very hormonally sensitive and very aggressive tumors. So we're seeing a lot of that. We're seeing that even in third world countries. In fact, breast cancer is now becoming the leading, like for example, in Malaysia and Indonesia, breast cancer is the leading cause of death of all cancers. It used to be, you know, in most countries, lung, colon, and then, you know, breast or prostate, et cetera. But that's how powerful breast cancer is becoming. It's really a scourge, a pandemic. So, and it comes down to exactly what you're asking about, and that is hormonal balance from an early age. So you can say, well, I don't need to get my hormones checked, I'm still young. No, get them checked, get them balanced with biologically identical plant-based hormones by someone who knows what they're doing, so that you don't have to develop anything like that.
Yeah. So when you say bioidentical hormones, are you always talking about creams, or do you also give them in pill form?
Yeah, you can get them in pill form.
And which ones are more effective? Like, is there different types of administration of these supplements?
Well, yeah, for the estrogens and testosterone, the topical creams are actually best, because you're bypass the liver. If you take anything in your mouth, it's got to go to your liver first, and that means your liver is going to break it down, and you might be getting maybe 1/3 or 1/4 of the amount. So therefore, in order to get adequate amounts, you have to take higher doses orally, and that puts more of a burden on your liver. So if you can just bypass that, it's much better. Now, there are some where you actually want the metabolites. So for example, in women who are postmenopausal, perimenopausal, having difficulty sleeping, you want to give them the oral progesterone because it's the metabolite that helps them sleep easier. So it's almost a sleeping pill for older women. But for the most part, I would say DHEA, pregnenolone, and sometimes progesterone are okay orally, whereas any of the estrogens and testosterone should be topical.
Yeah. And do you feel that any sort of fibroid or cyst should be seriously looked into for prevention? Like, does it automatically make you more susceptible for something a bit more serious in terms of why you get it?
Exactly, because it's just like a flower that's growing, or a tree that's growing. First you get the bud, and then you get the flower. Well, the bud is the cyst or the fibroid. You don't want it to flower.
Yeah. And this is what the problem is. Like, we get that checked, and then they say, oh, don't worry, it's benign, it's fine, don't look there again, it's fine, it's gone, we'll remove it. Whereas it's usually like a warning sign or a signal of something that is brewing, right, in the system.
When they remove it, what they do, they'll go and they can actually take out a cyst. They can keep the ovary. Sometimes they take the whole ovary, or they can remove a fibroid and keep the uterus, or take out the ovary. But if you took it all out, now you no longer have that. You still have the underlying biochemistry. So it's still going to have that effect, because it's not just the uterus and the ovaries that have estrogen receptors, right? There's a lot of tissues in a woman's body that have estrogen receptors. In fact, I have had several women who have developed ovarian cancer 5 years plus after having had their ovaries removed.
Where?
So they had in their abdomen, along different areas, because they still had ovarian tissue or ovarian remnants. Because
so once
it's just
you've taken out the cancer, you've tested it, and you realize it's an ovarian. It has ovarian cells in it.
It's got the ovarian markers. Yeah, it's so that just by removing something doesn't ensure that you're not going to get a cancer there. That's why there's no way around it. You have to change your lifestyle.
Yeah.
There's no way. You can't try to figure out a way. It's like trying to figure out a way is, what can I do so I can continue to smoke? How can I take an
trick the system? Yeah.
You can't trick it.
So last question, why aren't conventional doctors today aware of this, aware that, or maybe they are, I don't know, that removing an organ does not necessarily stop you from having the cancer related to that organ, or even giving out bioidentical hormones? Why aren't we seeing that in the mainstream?
Well, the mainstream are educated by the same group that educates doctors in medical school. And if we look at the funding for this, it's funded ultimately by pharmaceutical companies. So they, in fact, when I was an intern and a resident, or even a medical student, we would have lunches on Friday. They'd bring in pizzas, and they'd give us these pens and all this stuff, and we'd go to coupons to go to dinner, all these things. They were buying our loyalty. That's what they were doing. So when we look at all of the journals, the Journal of the American Medical Association, the New England Journal of Medicine, the British Journal, and all the well-known peer-reviewed journals that have the best reputations are 100% drug company produced. So when doctors are learning only about retail, they don't even know about compounding pharmacists. And if you ask them, they really don't know unless they have studied it, right? But they don't. Like, for example, vitamin C, which has, if you look, you would not believe the amount of research of good quality research, peer reviewed, that's out there, and yet you go ask a typical doctor and he'll say there's no research. You know what that tells you is not about vitamin C. It tells you about the doctor. He's not looking outside of what he's being told, and that's a serious problem. That's a very serious problem.
Yeah.
It's like you can't get an opinion on what is the best car out there by going to several Toyota dealers, right?
Yeah, it's not a second opinion. And I think this is where these episodes are important. People are now going to their doctors a bit more educated, thanks to conversations like this and many other people who are having these conversations and putting these subjects out there. Thank you very much, Dr. Lodi. It's always very, very interesting. I could go on forever, but I think we'll stop here and we'll wait for comments from people watching. If you're watching this, please leave us a comment, leave us a question for Dr. Lodi about this topic or any other cancer-related topic. And we'll pick up from the questions for future episodes. If you haven't yet registered on the channel, hit the subscribe button to register on the channel. Let us know what you think. Help distribute this episode so that knowledge is out there about complementary therapies. Thank you for watching.